Hi everyone, thank you for joining me in this session, Beautiful Branded Experiences that Build Trust, Communicating Your Brand Visually and Verbally to Connect with Your Audience and Build Rapport within your community. I'm going to be approaching this topic today as an overhead look at the value of trust and how to communicate trustworthiness through visual and verbal branding. Now, the goal of these tactics is to help you connect with your target audience and to build rapport within your tester community. And just a really quick introduction. My name is Simone Tompkins. I'm a content writer here at CenterCode. I've been with the company about 2.5 years now, but my experience with verbal and visual communication extends back throughout my career. I have a bachelor's in communications and I have a master's degree in journalism. My interests are largely focused around art, design, and creative writing. I've also spent a considerable number of years in the service industry, as many English majors you may or may not know. And I carry that customer-oriented mindset with me as a focal point of my personal and professional development. Now, on today's agenda, we're going to talk about why trust matters and the value it serves. Not so much from a product standpoint, but from a communication standpoint. Now, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is an overhead view on trust and what it means to the success of your customer validation projects as well as your tester community. Now, we'll talk about the choices to make and the strategies to implement that communicate trustworthiness, as well as the benefits that come with that, the long and short-term gains of branded content. Lastly, I have a few screen captures from the CenterCode platform that I'll go over, and that'll make it easier for you to get started. Does that sound good? I can't hear you, so we're just gonna go. But before we do that, I'm gonna take you back to the title slide. Now, you may have noticed that there are some interesting stylistic choices going on here and in the last couple of slides. Now, whether you picked up on these consciously or unconsciously, my title slides are full of errors, inconsistencies, extra spaces, and other little mistakes that, while they may not have affected your understanding of the topic, who I am, or what I do, they're sloppy, distracting, and unprofessional, especially given what we're talking about today. Now, one mistake is relatively inconsequential, but in situations like this, where I am a stranger positioning myself as an expert, even one, let alone several mistakes can completely undercut my authority. Because what do you really know about me? Sure, I told you my job and my background, but what have I done to actually demonstrate that I'm trustworthy? What evidence have I given you? Why should you believe me if I told you one thing, but then I show you this? Now, as customers, when we're out in the world, browsing the internet, watching TV, we pick up on these clues, these indicators of trustworthiness or untrustworthiness unconsciously. It informs our decisions and attitudes about products and brands before we've even had a conversation about it. And what's harder is taking a step back and translating these same standards to the way that we interact with our tester community. Now here, you can see all the little mistakes that undermine trust. We've got some spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, repeat words, things that wouldn't necessarily be caught by spell check or Grammarly because of the formatting, some weird spacing, incorrect title casing, and here on the next slide, you can see the difference. Trust is like an eraser. It gets smaller and smaller after every mistake. And that's really what we're getting at today, why it's important that the way that you communicate with your testers and by extension your customers demonstrates that your product, your brand, your company are worthy of their time, trust, and effort. Now, when it comes to building trust with your testers and potential testers, whether it's during recruitment, community building, or an actual test, the way that you communicate with them is their first indicator of whether or not your brand produces quality products. Now, the don't judge a book by its cover line doesn't really apply here. New relationships are easily shaken, and so it's essential to put your best foot forward from the get-go. Now, when your testers don't have a relationship with you, they have no reason to trust you. They don't know how much work or thought went into your product, and the chances are good that it won't ever cross their minds. That's why it's critical to establish trust, not just in the product, but also in the way that you communicate. It's not enough to rest on the laurels of your work, no matter how good that work is. Now, trust is at the center of your brand reputation, and it's built up through demonstrations of quality, value, and reliability. Now, this doesn't start and stop with the product itself. Clear communication and polished branding give a good impression, like a tailored suit. And like wearing that suit to an interview, it's a reflection of the effort and energy you're putting forward when you're asking people to volunteer their time and effort. Now, the kind of branding that inspires tester confidence is about more than uploading a logo, though yes, that is really important. Please put your logo on stuff. It's more important than running spell check because there's more to clear communication than spelling. Your branding should work in service to your larger goals, like anything else. Think of these interactions as an opportunity to promote your brand's values to your customers, to build up that lifestyle aspect that makes people align themselves to brands like Apple or Coca-Cola or Nike, and therefore makes these companies incredibly successful. Now, this is especially important during recruitment and testing because your testers want to feel like they're part of your team. Now, when you send out sloppy messaging or you invite them to a poorly branded platform, it demonstrates one of two things. One, you're careless, which makes them wonder, is this even real? Am I giving them all these personal, professional details and data? Am I being scammed? Or two, you just don't care, which if you don't care, why should they care? Now, it should come as no surprise that in the way that we associate beautiful branding with a beautiful product, your testers will correlate poor branding with a poor quality product. And to be clear, this isn't about tricking your testers with style over substance. It's about showing that you believe in your product and your company and that they should too. Now remember, when you're running a CV test, your testers are a concentrated sample of your target market, and you need to earn their respect and trust the same way you need to earn the respect and trust of your larger audience. Now, on that note, I'm going to move on to the ways that you can communicate trustworthiness. Now, I've broken it down into two primary aspects. We have verbal branding as well as visual branding, and I'm going to give you a few examples of both of those. And then we're going to take a really quick look at how you can apply those techniques to packaging your hardware units for testing, as well as reporting to your stakeholders. Finally, I've made a list of resources within your organization that you can use to get started. So when it comes to verbal branding, your word choice should reflect your brand and its values. Now, are you selling project management software to businesses? Are you doing like a fitness wearable that's casual and convenient and easy to use? Or is it a family-friendly device that's responsive and caring? Now, all of these brands are likely targeted to different audiences and would therefore describe things differently as a sort of bat signal that says to your customers, hey, this is for you. Now, the language that you use to describe your brand should connect it to your testers' values and their sense of self. The easiest way to do this is to use familiar language, to speak to them the way that they speak to each other. These values can encourage your customer testers to align themselves with your brand, and that makes them more likely to engage and stay engaged in your community. In the same token, the way that you talk to your customers should align with your brand values. And the way that you communicate changes considerably depending on your audience. For instance, the way that you talk to your partner is different than the way that you talk to your colleagues, which is, of course, different than the way that you talk to your boss. Now, if your partner is your boss, that's a different story, but never mind. Communicating in these different languages shows that you understand who they are and what they're interested in. It shows empathy for their needs and desires, and moreover, it gives people like a general sense of likeness. Most social scientists will tell you that people trust people who are like them. Now, obviously, spelling, punctuation, grammar, they all have a big impact regardless of your target audience. And this goes hand in hand with keeping the naming, casing, and formatting of your projects and program consistent. Now, we exercise this often here at CenterCode because our main audience is very different from the beta-bound community, which is our tester panel. Now, we try to keep communication colloquial and friendly for both because that's just part of who we are as a company. And so we do share certain similarities. We use contractions. We also use first and second person references, which is mainly you, we, and our language. And we also try to write both to be as natural and as human as possible. With that said, Center Code is business to business focused, while BetaBound is business to consumer. So BetaBound's primary audience is testers. So the language, the word choice, and the overall tone are necessarily much more informal and relaxed. They employ casual language to connect with their audience in an appropriately casual and approachable way. Now, I have a written example here to hammer up this point about approachable language. Now, here you see that I have given you two sample recruitment messages, and they effectively say the same thing, but they have two totally different styles. Both make requests, but one is more friendly and personable. They both use thank you, but then one demonstrates a higher level of graciousness by using an additional phrase, we really appreciate it. Now, they're both easy to read, but the one on the right just sounds a lot more human. And there's really no right or wrong way to craft content when you're strategic about it. That said, you should always be clear, courteous, and wherever possible conversational. It just speaks better to your audience, no pun intended. And it echoes back to a growing consumer emphasis on authenticity. That is, your consumers want to know that you're real people. They want to believe that you, and by extension your brand, genuinely care about what they care about. And when I say growing emphasis, I mean that a study by Bonfire Marketing revealed that 3 out of 5 consumers would buy from a brand that they perceive as authentic. Authenticity is important, and taking those extra steps to convey it is just one of the best gifts that you can give to yourself in terms of maintaining high engagement. Now, moving on to visual branding. Now, you obviously want to have your logo. It should be easy to find and read with adequate space around it. You also want your brand colors to be the right colors. Now, you can ask someone in your marketing or art department, or you can pull the hex codes from your website directly. A hex code is a color's unique web identification number. You'll also want your colors to be consistent throughout your platform, in your messaging, your reports, etc. Now, your fonts should be easy to read and true to your brand and your audience. So if you're trying to appeal to millennials, for example, don't use Comic Sans. It's very divisive. Now, the size and weights of your fonts are designed to establish a visual hierarchy, and this allows us as readers to prioritize information. So be consistent in the sizing and weights that you choose. That way the overall look is coherent. And this is mainly important for writing emails, creating slide decks, or designing graphics. You just want to stay away from cap locks unless you're genuinely yelling. I'm kidding, don't yell, don't ever yell. It's just not nice. Also, you only want to use bold, italics, and underlines when you really have to, and you never want to use them all at the same time. One is more than enough to get your point across. Now, these suggestions will help give your collateral a cleaner and less crowded look and feel, and that in turn will make it easier to read and digest. Now, I've mocked up these examples to illustrate some visual brands you may recognize, but you may not. Really optimistic that you'll get the last one. I'm going to give you a second to make up your mind and see if you can guess, and then I'm going to show you the answers. Okay, so you'll see that a few of these fonts are actually repeated, but they read differently because they employ different weights and spacing. So even without their logos, we could consider these clips visually branded. And the chances are, if your company has a graphic designer, art, or marketing department, they have access to the exact fonts and colors your brand uses. But I'm going to cover that a little bit more in resources, so just bear with me until then, okay? Packaging. This is mainly for hardware tests, but the general principle is the same. The way that you present your product reflects your brand, even if it's just for a customer test. Now, you obviously want to make sure that everything is accounted for and neatly assembled with your welcome letter and your instructions right on top, so your testers know exactly what to do as soon as they open the box. You want to make sure your logo is on there, and so your testers know who the package came from. And these are just best practices to help ensure that nothing essential gets thrown out by accident. It helps too if everything looks consistent between your packaging and your platform, because you want your testers to make an immediate association between the product in their hands and the tester platform where they're going to be cataloging their experiences with it. Now, most of what I've talked about so far has been focused on the application of branding externally, but you can also apply these tactics internally. One of the easiest ways to do this is by branding your reports. Now, using the same visual branding strategies here as you might for tester-focused messaging is a small thing that you can do to augment the consistency, the cohesiveness, and the professionalism of your program. And this is actually super easy to do within the CenterCode platform because you can set your reports to pull from the same color scheme as your community. I'll show you that later. But just remember that your stakeholders have the same trustworthy and untrustworthy instincts as everyone else. And it's these little attention to details that are going to bring added value to your CV program and bolster confidence in the work that you do. So this last slide about communicating trustworthiness, I'm just going to touch base on a few resources that you can leverage within your own company. Now, pause. This may seem like a lot to take in. And especially if this is a fresh perspective for you. But I want to stress to you that branding doesn't have to be complicated or extravagant. Now, in most cases, it's just the simplest things that convey the most. But whether you're making minimal adjustments or you want to go full ham, get really involved, it does require some effort, attention to detail, and thought. Now, thankfully, many of you can leverage the strategies and expertise of other departments, like I was saying, your marketing, your sales team, your art department. If you're lucky, you're going to have a graphic designer or two. And it's here in these departments, you're going to find people who literally spend hours thinking of the best ways to connect your brand with your target audience every day. And by association, connecting with your testers. So you should feel emboldened to reach out to them. If there's anyone there like me, they'll be super excited to talk about it with somebody else. And actually, establishing these connections with other departments is a great opportunity for you to showcase the value of your CV program as a direct line to your target market. For instance, you can report back to your marketing or sales team on which keywords and messages resonated best with your testers. Now, it's a very easy way to demonstrate inter-organizational value. And that's how you start cultivating champions for your program outside of your program. Now, similarly, if you're wondering where to find your brand colors, fonts, key phrasing, etc., your graphic designer's marketing team should also have access to things like brand guidelines, your style guide, and whatever file types you need to make beautifully branded content. Oh, and speaking of beautiful branding, let's talk about the benefits. When your content is beautifully branded, it gives your test and your product a sense of legitimacy. Now, like I said before, your testers want to feel like they're part of your team. So give them something nice. Make it feel official, When they're invested in your product, they're going to provide more feedback more frequently. They're going to stay active within your community, and if you're lucky, they're going to invite their friends to participate. Now, in a broader sense, well-executed branding implies that the product that you're testing is worth their time investment, their time and energy, their loyalty. It also represents your investment. It reflects the efforts your team and your stakeholders have put forward to produce this. Now, where there's trust, there's loyalty. And that's where you're going to find testers who become customers, advocates, and ideally brand evangelists, people who are going to adopt your product into their lifestyle. Better, more engaged testers means better results. And where there's strong results, there are stakeholders who are willing to go to bat for the work that you and your team are doing. All right. And before we wrap the session up, I just want to spend a couple of minutes showing a handful of easy-to-use features within the CenterCode platform. So if you're not familiar with the SaaS side of CenterCode, the platform is an all-in-one tool for everything that's CV related, from recruiting testers to spinning up projects, to running those projects, collecting feedback, and then analyzing the insights that they bring in. But I do want to stress that if you're not using the CenterCode platform to run your projects, you can still take the general principles I'm going to talk about and apply them to whatever tool you are using. So I'm going to show you some quick ways to customize your project space, your reports, your landing page, as well as your messaging. Okay, so this is the landing page for my test project space, which is for your amusement and mine, I call Momo Island, because it's bright and colorful, and definitely not because I spent an embarrassingly long time working on this. I'm going to pull some examples from here so that you can see simple, easily identifiable ways, excuse me, so that you can see the simple, easily identifiable ways that I've incorporated this tropical theme, as well as my personal brand voice throughout the entire project space. Now, these are your tools for customizing your project space, which you can configure in Visual Themes. Now here, you can see you can make a big impact with relatively simple stuff. You can upload your logos and your background image. You can customize your color scheme. And the bottom colors that you see there on the color panel are mostly defaults, but you can use those to customize your reports, which I will show you on the next slide. Now, if you're someone who knows how to code, or you have someone who knows how to code, you can also integrate custom CSS, which is super cool. So this is nice for folks who do have a particular image or design in mind and want to take it up a notch, but you shouldn't feel like you have to do everything or all of the things all the time. As the saying goes, you start where you are, you use what you have, you do what you can. So this is what I was talking about with the reports. So here on the left, you can see that we have the same color menu as before, but now you can see how those colors are applied in a report. Now, branded reports are a nice touch for your stakeholders. Just keep in mind that if you do want to do branding for your reports, which I do recommend, your colors shouldn't distract from the information that you're trying to convey. So just remember, clarity is king. Now here you can see the landing page again, and here you can see how I've pulled the colors directly from that background image to create the project space. So it's clearly visible in the login, and then when you enter the tester portal, those same colors are visible throughout the entire project and program space. Now, lastly, I have a screenshot of the customizable page strings on the left, as well as the email HTML capabilities the platform gives you on the right. Now, page strings are my favorite. They're a cool feature for brands that have a particular way of communicating to their testers or just have a very particular brand voice. I wrote these page strings to fit my personality and my sense of humor, and maybe got a little crazy. I do apologize. But you see that there's more casual iterations of things like log me out or cancel and okay than the just generic default. And you don't have to change everything. One of the best things about the platform is that it gives you the option. It's the same thing with the HTML template, and to be clear, there are benefits from sending out very simple, very human-looking emails. The formatting, for instance, tends to be a little bit more consistent across platforms in human-looking emails. But if you want to create a very polished or very stylized email template for your tester correspondence, you have that option. And really, that's the takeaway from all of this. Being strategic with your branding, whether it's simple or complex, can go a long way. You have to figure out what works best for your product, both in how to represent your brand and also just in what's possible in terms of your team's size, their skill, and their bandwidth. There are a wide range of options to explore. And if you're a platform user, our support team is amazing and friendly, and they can help you unlock all of the cool stuff that you're able to do in there. Now, that about wraps it up for me. I just want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope I gave you some helpful tips that you can take away and that'll get you started on the path to a beautiful branded platform. Please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or just shoot me an email. Like I said, I love talking about this stuff. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great time. That's it. Bye. Bye, everyone.